Hey everyone, welcome to the Ceres podcast. I'm your host, Stelios. In this episode, I'm thrilled to be joined by Stuart Devine from the Ashvale Group in Aberdeenshire. We dive deep into the Ashvale story, moving beyond our last discussion, which was really heavily focused on COVID-19. So I think, for all it's worth, this was a fantastic conversation. Stuart's always really honest, and I just love chatting to him. He's a really smart guy, so I'm really excited to share this with you. Today's episode is brought to you by Ceres Natural Batter Mix. This product is the cornerstone of our success. Without it, Ceres wouldn't be what it is today. Our natural batter mix is crafted from the finest ingredients, 2 British flours from Kent, Essex and Hertfordshire, combined with 2 unique raisin agents to give it our signature finish. It's so British that even our plastic-free paper sacks are sourced locally. I'm not sure it could be any more British if we tried. Using the natural batter mix is simple. Just add flour to cold water and mix. For those feeling adventurous, you can add carbonated water or beer. It has no added seasoning, so feel free to customise it to your taste or just go it alone, plug and play. Our natural batter mix contains no hidden nasties, no artificial flavours and colourings. It's fried to perfection. It's ideal for all businesses, from takeaways to restaurants, click and collect, delivery, pubs, restaurants, you name it. We love our natural batter mix, and it's a bestseller amongst the top operators across the UK using it. To get the Ceres Natural Batter Mix, visit www.ceres.shop for free next day mainland UK delivery, or purchase it from your favourite wholesaler. If you're interested, just get in touch with us. Stay updated with everything we're doing at Ceres by following us on social media, or join our mailing list and get the news delivered directly to your inbox. Whilst you're there, join the conversation on the Ceres Podcast Facebook group. The links will all be in the episode show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, why not share it with your friends or on social media? And a review on Apple Podcasts would also be greatly appreciated. Now, let's dive into today's episode with Stuart Devine. Hi Stuart, welcome to the Ceres podcast.
Good morning, Stelios. How are you?
Not bad, mate. Not bad. We've got glorious weather down here, mate. How is it up there?
It's not bad. It's improving. It's actually improving. We've had a wee bit of sunshine, which is it's been a long time coming.
It has, hasn't it? It just seems a bit slow on the uptake, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm glad you're on again. You know, for those that don't know, you were on in June 2020. So thank you for your time a second time. I wanted you on again because I think that episode was very much COVID related.
Yeah,
and
sure.
That's sort of behind us and we're ahead of that now, although we're still reeling from some of the effects. But yeah, for those that don't know you, Stuart, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at the Ashvale?
Yeah, I'm Stuart and I'm the operations director of the Ashvale. I've been in the trade now for over 38 years. I started when I was just a young lad, 16-year-old. I just took a part-time job at school. It wasn't my career path I was intending, but the couple of years I spent as a school kid, I really, really enjoyed what I was doing. I worked closely with John Lowe, who's my business partner, for all these years, and that was it, really. So when I came to crossroads of leaving school, John managed to persuade me to stay on as a trainee type manager thing, which I did. And then almost coming up for 38 years later, the rest is history, as they say, you know.
You must have enjoyed it to some degree, though, because obviously you decided to stay.
Yeah, I did enjoy it. I mean, it was something totally different. It was not the career path I'd chosen. I got in there. My first job ever was actually washing the dishes. But like every other job I did, I did it to the best of my ability, and I wanted to be the best dishwasher, you know. So, and then I went on from there, and then I moved across the kitchen. I started serving meals, and it was in the early days. I mean, we're talking about going back. Ashvale opened in 1985, so Ashvale will be 40 years old in January, which is quite an astonishing achievement, you know. And it was 86 I joined, and it was around about between the 87s that it started to hit the dizzy heights, and the food industry was the actual restaurant eating out scene was just beginning to explode. And we were lucky enough to be one of the first on the scene, which was a great place to be at the time. And we did special offers. We were very heavily in advertising at the time. And I just remember the restaurant and the takeaway going boom, and everything just went crazy. So I moved from being the washing the dishes. I started serving the meals. We were just smashing all records. It was just an incredible time to be involved. And then, like I say, once we went to leave school. By that time, I was in about the frying and what likes. And then it very quickly happened. We just started to add shops, and so it seems a bit of a blur now. So I suppose my working career has been a pretty quick process. So. But to say have I enjoyed it, yeah, of course I've enjoyed it. I've reaped the rewards. There's been a lot of rewards. It's given me a nice life. Although it's a hard working life, I will say that. I won't take it away from anyone. It's a hard way to make a living. But all these years on, I'm still going strong, but I'm still going.
You mentioned that you expanded. Like, how many sites did you get up to?
We were up to 12 at one point. 12, some restaurants, some takeaways, a bit of a mix of both. Now we're back down to about 5. So we rent a couple out. We have 5 we run ourselves. I think at one point we employed just over 200, and we're now around about the 100 mark. Yeah. So it's just been a natural change, because some work better than others. Staffing issues, try to get good people got a wee bit tougher. So we're quite comfortable where we are now. Sitting on the 5 and the 100 people, it's quite comfortable. It's probably slightly more easier, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I could imagine. So when was the last one? When would you say you was at 6? Like, was it all over COVID, or was it before COVID, or has it just been naturally?
Yeah. We came out of COVID. Coming out of COVID, or during COVID, we did sell one. Again, we kind of lost the manager. It was a bit of an issue getting a new manager. Somebody wanted to buy the shop, so it made sense to get rid. Also, during COVID, it probably helped with our cash flow as well. And you know what? COVID taught you a lot of things, and we kind of decided, we probably can't go on, at the speed that we are. So downsizing was a natural thing to do, and we will probably continue to naturally downsize as the years go,
Yeah. Do you sort of, in some ways, just see the simplification of just scaling back to the one original one without spooking anybody here? But because obviously the main one you've got is quite a big site, and the others are smaller sites, aren't they?
Yeah, but you know what? It's funny. It's funny you say that, because we haven't really mentioned how the fish and chip industry is getting on at the moment. But there's a lot to be said for most fish and chip operators are perhaps a husband and wife. They run their fish and chip shop. They run it very successfully. They get a wage out of it. When you go along the other road, are restaurants and takeaways and different various branches. You're then talking about management. You're talking about office staff. At one point, we've still got an engineer, so we employ an engineer, a full-time engineer. But we actually had a catering company at one point with 7 or 8 engineers, believe it or no. I'm not saying we've been a bad job of it, but again, the problem there was getting money in, so we naturally let that one go. We still we have a cash register company specialising in EPOS systems. Again, because we found it was, why not just do it ourselves, as opposed to getting people in, let's do it ourselves. And then we went out to the market. And so that's quite a successful branch of what we've got is the EPOS, because that's where, especially because of COVID, everything's went down that road of apps and websites and online deliveries and, ordering systems. And also the incredible thing with that business is it's all done online now. So when you actually sell a contract to a customer, they really need you. And if they don't pay their bills, you could actually just cut them off. Not that you do that. I mean, I think that's why most people just pay their bills. But in the days of actually calling out an engineer and they've got to go down to your shop and have a look at your till or your computer or whatever it is, you don't even have to do that now either. You can all be done online. So and a lot of that really did expand really quickly because of COVID. So that was an interesting one. And that's really going fine. But I suppose my point I was getting back to is, having the system that we have, it's all about, we've got a management in place, and there's a lot of extra costs.
Yeah.
So
it becomes
there's a lot to be said for, if you get yourself a little fish and chip shop that's successful with a reasonably good turnover, you can make as much money as you would out of a restaurant, because a restaurant's quite hard work. You need your condiments, you need your, stuff for bars and alcohol and all these things. So it's a bit more complicated. So looking back, it's a hard one. Although you get a lot of enjoyment out of restaurants, and serving customers, it's a difficult one. So if someone was starting up again and wanted to branch out and end up with 12 shops, I don't know what I would say to them. I don't know the advice I'd give them,
So operationally, with your operations hat on for a moment, what do you think makes it hard for fish and chip shops to scale? In our industry, we've got the Chesterford Group, we've got Deep Blue, which now have Harry Ramsden's, we've got Pappas. There's others, I haven't named them all, there's George's Tradition and so on. But in your opinion, what makes fish and chips hard to scale?
Probably two things. Staff is a big thing, right? Staff is a big thing. I remember in the early days when we had a lot of women would work behind the counters and do the frying, and that kind of disappeared. Women tend to be, I would be sexist, I'm not sexist at all, so I wish they did still work in the fish and chip shops at nights. But they probably are now, more career path during the day or at home looking after their children. So it's actually getting that women who are great for the industry back into it. That's a difficult one. So staffing's your first issue. And then, of course, your next problem is, which relates to the staff as well, is consistency. So it's how you actually keep that consistent product. And I know that some of these bigger ones in England, they have very small menus, which must help. If you keep your menu down to a limitation, it must help. Whereas you find up here in Scotland, there's more and more products on offer. And it just, like I say, I think we did a reasonably good job at achieving consistency, but it's not easy. It's not easy to get that,
No, absolutely. And when you were growing, if you don't mind me, because you've got a business head on you, was that was it through growth of investment business partners? Was it the banks that were helping fund it, or was it just purely through turnover of the business?
It was a bit of both. It was a bit of turnover of business, but it was also the banks were there. The banks certainly helped us. And now with all these years through the business, we've got very little borrowings now. We still have a good relationship with the bank just in case you need them. So it was really built out of both. I suppose we might have thought at one point that we were invincible, and we thought this is the way forward. Just let's keep going. We could just do this and do this and do this. And then, it's kind of, obviously if you've been in business 40 years, not every year you're on the up. So you've got to take the downs with the ups, Sometimes you've got to reassess the business. Sometimes you've got to look at what you do differently. And we've probably continued to do that. And we've scaled back a lot. Costs, we've had to cut costs because the business has definitely changed. I remember being in Aberdeen when this business first opened up, and our takeaway was up till 1 o'clock in the morning. And 12 o'clock, when all the bars emptied, the takeaway would have a queue out the door every Friday, every Saturday. But if you went to the city centre, which was just round the corner, you're talking a few hundred yards, you probably wouldn't find any other takeaways open. So that was a different ballgame, and that was a glory days. But if you go in that same city centre now, which is a couple of yards away, it's just takeaway after takeaway after takeaway. So the goalposts have changed dramatically over the years. And it gives you a different business. So business is different. I remember this restaurant, because I like to say at the time when we opened and the eating out scene was exploding, I think you had a choice of about 5 restaurants in Aberdeen. 5 ones that would cater for the family. And of course, fish and chips had that wow factor to it, which I think it still does. But a choice of 5 restaurants. Now, if you go and count the restaurants now, you must have 250 or something. It's dramatic. So you've had to change your business as you go, as you went forward. But like I say, almost 40 years on, we're still here. So we've done okay.
But obviously there is challenges, and but like any business, challenges come and go, and and I guess like you say, you have to take the downs with the ups, and so we sort of where we are today. And I notice you've got 5 stores, but one is in Elgin, and it feels like an outpost compared to your others. Is that difficult operationally, keeping that shop going, or stocked up, or feel supported from the head office?
No, no, it's not difficult. We've had a manager in there, like we have for each site. We've had a manager in there for the duration, which is a great thing. That helps dramatically. I mean, the Brenda who runs that shop up there is very steady, very consistent. She knows what to do. We get very little hassle from her. I'm here every. She can speak to me any day she wants. Any issues she got, we sort out. But so we've got a pretty close working relationship. So if I'm not up there once a fortnight, I'm certainly on the phone. She sends me everything she needs. I get it back up to her. So she's done a great job. Which helps, So it's and Elgin's not that far away. So it's an hour's drive. So I jump in my car and I'm there in an hour. So
yeah,
it's not bad.
So when we had you on the last episode, one thing that you enlightened me to is how there can be peaks and troughs in the local economy in Aberdeen. And then when we were messaging each other a few weeks ago, we didn't really press on it, but you alluded to that the additional windfall tax on energy companies has had unintended consequences. Could you enlighten us a little bit about that?
Well, Aberdeen is very much an oil related area. Aberdeen in the northeast is very much oil. Obviously, in the olden days there was fishing and there was different things, but now it really is mainly an oil-related city. And most people who work in Aberdeen work one way or another involved with oil. And there's now, and I speak to a lot of pals. I've got a lot of friends who work in the oil, and they all tell you that the uncertainty is not good. There's a major level of uncertainty. No one really knows what the future holds. Every day just now, there's a company, I can see the building from my office window here, and they're away to shed 100 jobs. Another one the other week there, 150 jobs. Now that's nothing new. So oil companies tend to do that. They go ups and downs, and then they have clear outs and what have you. But right now, there's a major level of uncertainty, and it's got a lot to do with a lot of things. The big windfall tax, which obviously I think it's related to COVID. Really, we've got to pay for COVID for the furlough schemes, etc. So the way the government have obviously seen it is right. Let's just hammer the oil companies into the ground, really. So that's okay. That's okay because they would still be making good money. But the options the oil companies have got at the moment is, and don't quote me in figures, I'm not sure exact figures, I know it's high, but I think that it's like 80% or 85% they're taxed on profit, right? But right. If you're making mega profit, it might be okay, right? But the option the oil companies have got now, because the world's a small place now, right? And getting from A to B is not that difficult. They can go to, the Middle East, where it may be, I don't know what it is, but I know it's a lot less than 80 or 85% tax on profit. It could be 40%. So if you went for 40% in the Middle East or 85% in the North Sea, you're going to be twice as well off, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the mega options the oil companies have got. Then you've got another uncertainty that you've got the Conservatives in power at the moment who have started to dish out the licences again for the North Sea. You've got the Labour Party who look to be set to form the next government. At one point they were saying, we'll stop the licences. You've got more complicated in Scotland because we need to do things differently. Is you've got SNP in power who need the Green Party to make up their numbers, who are saying they would stop oil altogether. Right now, it's just a mess. It's just a mess, really, because it's fine stopping oil to go green, right? And go for the wind farms, etc., etc. But when your country is still reliant on oil for, say, the next 20 years, and if you don't produce it yourself, you're going to have to import it. Where is the intelligence behind that? Right?
Well, this is what we saw in Germany, isn't it? They got rid of everything, and then they had to import it.
Yeah. And the world's a terrible place right now, right? It's full of uncertainties, wars. I don't get any of it. I just think it's obscene. But I think you should make yourself self-sufficient, right? And use your own resources to your advantage, right? Because not only are you using your own oil, but you're creating job upon job upon job, which just goes right down the line. Everybody's a winner, even to the small, humble fish and chip shop, right? Because as long as that people are making good money, they're going out, they're having a little bit of relaxation, they're going to go for fish and chips, they're going to go for a pint of lager, they're going to buy some new clothes because they feel good. It just goes on and on and on. But right now, we're just faced with a massive uncertainty and we're just stuck in limbo. That's how I find it,
Yeah, no, it feels that way, doesn't it? It does, and it feels like because we are sort of an election. There's been a lot of turmoil anyway. If you think of COVID and then inflation and so on, and then obviously Brexit before that. So then you pile it all together, and now obviously, it's not obvious to anyone that doesn't know, but in Scotland you've also got this local turmoil with the SNP that's blown up. How does that affect consumer confidence?
It's not good. It's not good. I mean, even that you go back to that further. I mean, the English government, the British government, who represents England in general, because we've devolved powers to Scotland, but they actually at least recognise slightly that hospitality has probably had the hardest time coming out of COVID, and they at least recognise that by putting in a reduction in business rates, right? In Scotland, because it's a devolved power, they just says absolutely not. No deduction in business rates. So Scotland's been paying the full business rates for 2 more years than anyone else in the country. Personally, for our business, it would have saved us, if we got the same deduction as England, it would have saved my business £45,000 a year. Wow. Now, I find that grossly unfair. So that's a kind of mess. But the uncertainty with the SNP, I mean, it's not different from what's happening in Westminster. I believe that there's going to be a change in the next election, whenever it comes. I think the SNP are probably going to have a hard hit. Whether they're wiped out, I wouldn't like to say. I try to stay out of politics. I think it's. I spoke to a long-term politician. He was one of my bingo nights the other week there, and he's now served in the House of Lords. And he would go down as a proper politician. He served his time. He was a good guy. 32 years. He was an MP for one of the areas around here. And he said, Stuart, it's not in a good place. He says, politics in general is not in a good place. People's in it for the wrong reason. There's going to be big change, but I don't know if it's for the better. That's more or less what he says. So it doesn't help anybody. I noticed today that the SNP have created a new cabinet, but they have dropped the role of independence minister. Right? Now that's a big thing, because independence, whether you're for it or not, it depends what hat I would put on. But I went against the idea because I thought, you know what, it's going to be messy. It's going to be messy. It's going to be costly. And it doesn't make me less Scottish, because I'm as Scottish as you'll ever see. Put me in a football terrace in Scotland versus England, then you'll know all about it, right? But I just thought, this is not different to Brexit. Nothing different to Brexit, right? I get Brexit, but it was always going to be messy, because Brexit's worse. If Scotland left the Union, they believe in England, Ireland and Wales. Britain left the Brexit and they left, 29 countries or something, right? So it's just on a grander scale, and it was never going to be easy. Not that I was against the idea, but I knew it was going to be absolutely swarmed with problems.
Yeah. You're realistic to the fact that none of these decisions are going to be easy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and I think this is how politicians try and fool us, don't they? They say, "Oh, it's going to be easy."
Yeah,
and it never is.
Yeah, we're going to have so much more money, blah, blah, blah. We're going to cut your rates or taxes. We're going to cut VAT. That was all the promises. And when
I don't. If I look back at that time, they weren't actually promises. They were saying we could if we wanted to. And I think it always falls back to that second bit. They don't want to, so they won't. And that's the way I see it. I think other people disagree, but they didn't ever promise. The promise was that if they wanted to, after Brexit, they could. Do you understand the wording difference?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They just left it open. And it's been a letdown. I mean, I don't actually see where we've really prospered from Brexit. If you
I think it's still too early, isn't it? I think it's still too early.
Yeah, I says it's probably going to take 10 years to see any light at all, And I think that would have been exactly the same as Scottish independence. But it's like, I don't discry a politician because I take my hat off that, you know what, you're going to do a job. Most of them are going to go try to do a job to make people's lives better, right? That's the idea of a politician, right? They've got plans, they've got ideas, they've got decisions to make. Hopefully they'll listen to the people and go and try and make something happen. But, you just think to yourself, where's it all going? Because we're going in the wrong direction. We're definitely going in the wrong direction now. It's a mess, and I don't see how it's going to get any better in the foreseeable future. And that's what I thought. I thought independence for Scotland, that'll give us 10 years of pure misery and pain, right? And I thought, you know what, I could be doing without that, And also, that's the big thing. That's what's coming to. The big thing is they were basing it on North Sea oil. Right?
Yes, I was just thinking this as you were talking about.
They based all the riches of Scotland on North Sea oil. Oil and whiskey, right? Oil and whiskey. We've still got the whiskey, right? So how can you base your independence fight on North Sea oil and then you go in bed with the Green Party because you need them to make up your numbers and you decide that you're dumping North Sea oil, right? And you're going to live off of renewables, which is wind farms in the North Sea, which maybe work, but they don't, apart from the people who build them and put them up, they are non-employment things, right? They don't employ people. There's not guys that flock out to a wind farm and spend 2 weeks in the sea pumping out, wind for any of us, right? So it's standalone things, no employment really, in comparison to the 50,000 people who work in the North Sea.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think. Well, I hope that the Greens as an SNP don't go after whiskey next because I do like my whiskey, but nothing's a promise, eh? Well, so they might do that. But I think one of the things I just wanted to point out is I think that the difference between SNP turmoil and the Conservative turmoil, I think anyone could see that the Conservatives are going to have a real hard time in the next election because I think a lot of people are just sick of them. I think we always see this when you see people that have been in power for so many terms, for example, Thatcher, Tony Blair. I think after a while, the nation does get sick of it. Whereas SNP, only 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago, they were untouchable. No one would have thought, fast forward 18 months to 2 years, that this would have been a headache for them.
No, I mean, it's gone terribly wrong. It's gone terribly wrong. I mean, behind the scenes, it's gone terribly wrong. I mean, during COVID, again, I've got admiration for Nicola Sturgeon. I think she did a great job in COVID for the country. I think she genuinely did what she thought was best. Maybe a little bit, she just went the opposite direction of the British government to try and show them up. So there's maybe a bit of that. But she could do no wrong. And now, if you were an SNP follower, you should be pretty disappointed with what's went behind the scenes, And I'm not forecasting what's going to happen. I know there's cases against her husband, etc., etc. I don't get too involved. I don't pay that much attention to it. But you've been an SNP follower, you must be let down. You must be feeling pretty let down. And I think that's why the independence scenario has been put in the back burner. And I think this says, look, let's forget about the independence right now and let's try and stabilise where we are. Because otherwise they're going to face the same as the Conservative Party and find that they're wiped out,
I didn't quite realise how the Conservatives are the second biggest party in Scotland. I thought, in my head, I just had it that it was SNP, Labour, Conservatives. And then after doing a bit of research on something else last week, I was very surprised to see that Conservatives are actually second.
Yeah. Scotland's really made up of cities, in the big cities, especially Glasgow. And whoever wins in Glasgow tends to win in Scotland, right?
I see, okay.
And the SNP, obviously, the whole of Glasgow were probably fed up with the Labour Party and they just crossed over to the SNP and says, right, that's it. So it wiped out the Labour Party. And the Labour Party did get wiped out. You'll find that the Conservative Party are in more rural areas, farmlands.
Okay.
They've got a strong following there. So they do pick away, and they've always picked away. and a small minority. They're
Yes.
very limited. They like Aberdeen being the oil city with a wee bit of wealth. They've picked up a seat or two around this area, but generally they kind of struggle in the big populated areas.
Yeah.
So it'd be an interesting one. I think that people, I mean, they're like a little army, but I think that army of people will naturally just move from SNP, and most of them will switch to Labour. That's what I would forecast, But there are some SNP followers who are still hell-bent on independence, and they will probably still show some sort of loyalty, even though they must be let down,
And I'd imagine that just like Brexit, there'd be some people, a small core of people that vote for it regardless of the outcome, but they don't care whether we'd be in a recession for 20 years, because there is always a small tangent of really hardcore people. And I think for the most part, 90% of everybody just sits in the middle of an issue, but there is also a small, very obsessive, small minority that really want something. So that'd be interesting to see how that all plays out.
It's quite brutal. I mean, it's quite brutal. The new first minister today is on the TV, and he's saying, right, my first goal is to wipe out child poverty, right?
Okay.
How long have they been in power for? So you've probably, you've created it, and now you want to wipe it out. So it's pretty damning. It's like
they all do a bit of that though, don't they?
Yeah.
All politicians, shall I say? They all want to fix the problems that they made and tell us that it's something new.
Yeah.
But you touched on business rates, and they are slightly different from the UK, because obviously in the UK there is hospitality rate relief. But you also, in Scotland, I'm surprised how many people probably don't actually pay business rates, basically. So, commercial business rates. Because I had a quick look, and you've got Fresh Start relief, Business Growth Accelerator relief, charitable rate relief, hardship relief. And I know that you don't get hospitality rate relief, and you probably don't get any rate relief at all because of your site's big and your multiples. But it feels like, and I've said this many times to a lot of people about rates, that I think the problem is every time someone gets relief, that means someone like the Ashvale, like Wetherspoons, like the multiples, they have to pay at full price. Yeah. And I think, so it's almost like, you're being penalised whilst the small business is being subsidised. So how do you handle that? Do you not just think that the whole business rate system just needs overhauling?
Yeah. An overhaul would be nice. I mean, I think they did give some relief to the islands, right? They gave some rate relief to the islands, but I mean, how is that fair? I mean, I know they're on the islands, but when you go on the islands, I was quite astonished. But I went to, just coming out of COVID, because you couldn't go very far. My wife and I and my youngest daughter, we went on this NC 500, which is a 500-mile trip around the Highlands, and we actually went to Skye, which is obviously one of the islands, and I was quite astonished as to how expensive fish and chips were, but probably quite rightly so. So they're getting high prices for their products, and now they're getting rate relief. So you could argue, how fair is that?
Yeah. So, but you still get small business rate relief over there, which obviously doesn't apply to you. So that small chip shop that you saw probably doesn't pay rates anyway.
Yeah, well, that cheers me up. I don't sit here with envy. I'm glad that you're getting some sort of relief. Because I know they need it. I know it's
I'm utterly convinced that the system is broken. I just think that if everybody paid rates, it could be cheaper. So, for example, registered charities don't pay rates on high streets. Well, no, sorry, they get an 80% discount in England. I don't know about Scotland, but it's a business. They are competing next to a Wetherspoons. Sorry, Waterstones, which is a bookshop. They are selling goods and they are making profit. Yeah. Their staff are employed. They're not very rarely are charity staff volunteers these days, especially in retail setting. So I just think if everybody paid rates at a lower rate, it just makes complete sense to me.
Yeah, it needs reviewing. The problem is how do you come up with the perfect scenario, and how do you please everyone? I know it's, some people in the fish and chip industry will be sitting back saying, well, I'm quite happy, whereas I think it's unfair. I think it's tough. in the actual business itself it's not a bed of roses. I mean, you're actually working very hard to show some sort of profit, and that wears you down. You eventually get worried. The excitement goes, the fun goes.
Yeah.
And you are. I feel you are working at the moment just to keep your head above the water, right? Going back to what I said about the business setup that we've got, right? I don't run a fish and chip shop with just my wife and I. We have to pay wages for 100 staff a week. You pay their pension contributions, their national insurance contributions. The government again is lowering national insurance to try and fool the person, But what about the poor employer? What about employer? I mean, they've never mentioned that the national insurance contribution is not coming down. The pension contributions were just sneaked in there a couple of years ago, which when you put it all together, you think, wow, where did that come from? But everyone's excited. And I even feel sorry for the individual person that's now getting hit for pension contributions. Now, before it just came out, you paid your PAYE, you paid your tax, you paid your national insurance, and at the end of the day, you got a pension, right?
Yeah.
And now the government just managed to sneak in, well, it's a fact, we want more from you. We want a lot more from you. With still no guarantees that the money you're giving to them is going to give you a nice settled life when you're a pensioner. Right? Because I think you read it all the time on social media that the minimum wage is now at $11.44 or $52 or something like that. Which if you do, which amounts to £20,000 a year, but the poor pensioners got to live off under 10,000.
Yeah.
So you think, where's this all going? It's just like, what a mess.
I feel like to some degree that quietly. Again, whether you like him or not, Rishi Sunak seems to be trying to deal with certain things. And I think one of the biggest things that has put undue pressure on business is the fact that, they're lifting all the PAYE, all the tax and everything for employing employees. And that's partly because the way I've read it over the years is that Gordon Brown implemented working tax credits. And now they're trying to fix that because what happens is the average person earns X, that isn't enough. So then they pay their tax and then they get rebates off the government and maybe some extra top up as well. And I don't think that's sustainable either. So there seems to be mistakes over the years that have just been compounded with more mistakes. And now once they try to clean it, it's quite painful for business.
Yeah, it's brutal. Right now, I'd say it was brutal for a business. We, as a fish and chip shop or whatever you have, you've incurred mega rises in costs. I mean, flours, fat, you'll know yourself exactly the increase in costs. Out of Brexit, out of wars, it's just been like never ending. The potatoes have gone way up in price. Fish goes up and down like you can't imagine. Now you're hit with extra wage costs, and it's all right saying it's not the minimum wage, not to do with the minimum wage. We pay our staff on average way above the minimum wage, but it doesn't just affect those at the bottom; it affects everybody. So everybody in our company this year got their wages up. So 100 people. I estimate it's going to cost us about an extra £1,200 a week. Which is £60,000 a year you've got to find to stand still, right? And at the same time, the price of fish and chips are going up dramatically. I mean, they're going up. I mean, I remember that I was my little picture was in the front page of the Sun newspaper many years ago, saying, "Wow, fish and chips are set to hit £5." Right, £5. So now we are sitting at 11. It's £11. I'm looking at some other shops around about this area, and I've seen an £11.30, I've seen an £11.80, I've seen a £12. Right, I've seen £12 for fish and chips, and that scares the living daylights out of me, right? Because I think somebody walking into your fish and chip shop on a Friday night, 4 fish and chips, couple of cans of juice, and you turn around and say that's 50 quid, right? That to me is like, that's not good. It's not good. It doesn't please me, and I don't think anybody's stealing the money from you, right? Nobody's making a massive fortune out of charging you £50 for 4 fish and chips and 4 cans of juice, right? And that's where we are, and it's it's a terrible place to be.
The thing is,
fish and chips were always considered as being affordable. And you know what? Yeah, we have fish and chips every Friday night.
Yeah.
Right?
But I do think with the way that inflation is, I completely get your concerns. But across the economy, everything's more. You know, cigarettes cost more, beer costs more. You know, going to McDonald's costs more. Going to the supermarket costs more. So diesel costs more. So do you think customers think like you? Are you you're coming from a good place, like there's no doubt. Like you worry that it's too much, and that's obviously, you know, that is really kind. But do you think customers think like that, or do you just think this is the new norm?
I think 100% right now, your average customer is worried to death about their finances, right? And they're worried about their interest rates on their mortgage. They are worried about disposable income. How much have they got of it? You have to remember that eating out or drinking, right, whatever you do, when you go for a pint, watch the football, go for a fish and chips, just have a nice sit-down meal, it's because you've been working hard and you know what? You need a bit of relief, right? You need a wee bit of de-stress time. Let's go out and do something that we enjoy, right? And now you're going out and you're thinking, God, you know, you and your wife, you pop in for your tea, and you have 2 drinks each, and you pay for your bill, and it's like £72, right? And you think, wow, I wouldn't want to do that. I can't afford to do that every week. Now, that's your average. I know there's exceptions to the average, right? But the average consumer now, who's eating our fish and chips, etc., are now thinking, I need to cut back, right? Why do you think the emergence of Aldi's and Lidl's, right? Why do you think these supermarkets have prospered dramatically in the last 6 years, right? Because they are cheaper, they are pretty good quality. I remember in the early days, I didn't think the quality was good, but now the quality has increased dramatically, and they've got lower prices, and people are looking to save the pennies. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where I think we are, and that's the proof in the pudding. Even the Marks and Spencers, right? I always remember gauging the Ashfield. I used to think we were like the Marks and Spencers, fish and chips. We trained staff, we made them look smart, we made them do their jobs properly. We did appraisals, we did all these things, similar to how Marks and Spencers run their business, right? But even Marks and Spencers had to totally change how they operate. They've gone in for, they've taken prices down, different products, and they're successful. I mean, what they're doing is successful, but they've got rid of lots of stores. They've got rid of, lines of clothing, and, forget about selling knickers and all these things that they sold and were famous for. And they're concentrating on decent food at a reasonable price.
Yeah, I do think that was a business problem, though. I think Marks and Spencers, if I look at their business, it had just become very tired, very outdated, and that they had to deal with that because they obviously what they faced was extinction. Whereas I don't know if that's the same as inflationary pressures. And obviously, I know you mentioned Lidl and Aldi. I live in the town where the Aldi headquarters is, so you sort of hear a few things, and they just saw it as a market that they could grow it. I don't think they saw any of this as in, it's a recessionary place or anything. And the fact that Tesco and Sainsbury's have had record profits over the last year or two as well. I'm not arguing. I wonder if there's a difference between a business plan that's evolved and inflationary pressures. And I think for me as a consumer, because I am a consumer of fish and chip shops, yes, I supply them, but I'm also a consumer. Anything we do outside the home or even for inside the home costs more. And I still think if a consumer was going to get in a week Chinese food, Indian food and fish and chips in a course of a week, I think that all of those things have gone up. Now, maybe some disproportionately than others. I think that's fair to say that fish and chips, because of the fact that it is labour intensive, good quality potatoes, good quality fish, that's always going to carry a heavier penalty than something like, without being, derogatory, but like Chinese food or Indian food, which is a bit of protein with a lot of sauce and some rice. if that makes sense.
Yeah. The problem is that I can see. I read another one. There's another restaurant that's been in the city, just outside the city where I stay. It's been there for 27 years, and that's it. They're closing the doors, right? They're closing the doors, and they're saying, that's it. We can't do any more. We ain't working like this anymore because it's just not worth it, right? Now, I clicked onto Facebook this morning, and there's another place down south, and they've been there for years, and they're saying exactly the same thing. That's it. I've had enough, right? So it is a problem. It is a problem, and I get it. And it's not good. But of course, I did an article for the Times recently, and the girl more or less said to me that the attitude of the government is it doesn't matter because for every place it shuts down, there's a new one opens up, right? And I says, yeah, but if you lose the ones who have been there for 27 years, the ones that have put their heart and soul into it and employed a lot of people, put a lot of money back into the economy, as my guess is that these new ones open up. My guess is the last 3 years, right? And she says, how do you know that? And I said, well, it's just a guess. She says, well, I've got the research in front of me and it's absolutely correct. These new places are lasting 3 years, on average, 3 years. Now, where are we going to be in 3 years, right? I don't know if you got a high street in your where you stay, but we've got a high street, big street in here, and it's just getting riddled with takeaways. You know, some of the American, the Popeyes was the one that opened the other day there, right? Mm-hmm. But they're coming and going. They're coming and going. They've got a shelf life, and then they're gone.
Yeah,
and that's not good. I mean, that's no foundation to build for the future. If you lose people like ourselves, ones that have been in the business a long, long time, and then just where do we end up? That's my concern.
Yeah. So you mentioned in some of our preparation, or you sent me an email, and you think that the answer to all of this, or to most of this, is lower VAT. So could you give me some of your thoughts on this? Yeah,
I've been a big supporter of a drop in VAT. Probably for if you remember VAT, 17.5%, there was a banking crisis and the Labour Party moved in, the Labour government moved in, and it was under Gordon Brown or Blair, and he says, right, this is a crisis, let's lower VAT, right? Let's lower it to 15%. And it was like, and that's when it was quite a lot of years ago now, and I really started to take a note to the difference that VAT could make. Unfortunately, we had a girl in our office. She's been here for 38 years, and sadly she passed away in November. So it's kind of left a bit of a real void in our place. We've picked up a lot of pieces, so now I know VAT off the back of my hand, right? But so at 15%, well, wow, what a difference! And then to the Conservative government when they got into power, when Brown was replaced, and they said we will put VAT back to 17.5%. That was their pledge. But they bypassed 17.5 and went straight to 20, right? And you thought, that's not good. And that was the start. That was the start of the squeeze, right? Where you're squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, and you're thinking, this is not so easy. It's not so easy. In fact, it's really tough. So then along came COVID, and they handed out, they said, right, that's 5%. Well, 5% or nothing's nothing. Doesn't matter, right? And we did get back to business in a small scale. Restaurants were still closed, etc. We paid 5%, and yes, it was a wee bit of a help, right? If for takeaways, restaurants none, takeaways a little bit, right? And then we got a grace period of 12.5%, and you thought, this is comfortable. This is actually comfortable. Business was regrowing, nothing like what it was, and business is still not back to the level of what it was. In my opinion, certainly my business is nowhere near back to the level of what it was prior to COVID. But at 12.5%, you had a fighting chance. In actual fact, we did make money, and any loan I took from the government, I paid it all back because I thought that's probably good for the future. And that VAT at 12.5% allowed us to do that. It allowed us to invest in a better EPOS system, an app, a couple of new vans for delivery. It was all about growth and investment, right? And then, despite the cries that don't do this because 20% is going to kill our business, no, Sunak went back to 20%. Then, of course, in came Jeremy Hunt. I don't know which one actually. I think Sunak was there, then Hunt. And they've completely ignored the pleas to reduce VAT by anything, right? And I think it says in my notes, look, some people cry for 12.5%, right? You think, well, I don't think the country could probably afford it. It'd be great if they did. It'd be great if it did. The country would catch fire. When it would catch fire, it would be boomtown, right? But realistically, even back to 17.5% would give you some sort of hope, right? Back to where it was. It would give you some sort of hope, and it would probably just about keep you on the right side of the line, and you know what, you'd get on with it. There's a bitterness towards the 20%. And the fact that it's just fell on deaf ears, and you're just being ignored, and there's places closing right, left, and centre. You're like, well, no, I'm sorry, but no wonder you're away to be wiped out in the election. Because bearing in mind that everybody is affected by hospitality, whether you work in it, whether you use it, whether you now find it too expensive, you are bitter towards the fact that hospitality right now, which gives you an out, it gives you that pleasure a bit of your life, is struggling like hell. Your local places are shutting down. You think it's unfair. Read the feeds on Facebook. You read a feed on Facebook where a local place is shut down. So 227 comments saying this isn't fair, this is not fair, it's a disgrace, companies have been taxed to the limits, blah blah blah, food's too expensive. So everybody's aware, everybody speaks about it because it's an easy topic to speak about.
So do you think that's why it's always spoken about, though, because it's an easy topic? Does that make it the right answer? Because if I'm being devil's advocate here, if VAT was lower, how you said they're getting wiped out, but how would VAT being lower keep them in power? Well, because that, as a politician, I would think, oh yeah, let's just stay in power. Let's do the easiest thing. So how do you think that would keep them in power?
It would have stopped prices going up overnight, right?
But it only stops prices going up overnight if people drop their prices, which, looking at fish and chip groups, looking at lots of other groups, businesses aren't willing to drop. So, I think we're in a mega competitive market, right? You're competing with many, right? You're competing with many. There's lots of discount schemes and all these things. You've got to, once you're at our size and you need people coming through your doors, you're not just a little takeaway, which gets your customers naturally because that's where they stay, right? When you need people driving to you and going through your restaurant doors, you've got to be competitive, right? Now, it's okay being competitive and going bankrupt, right? That's not clever, right? But if you've got a little bit of leeway to play with, you can afford to be competitive, right? In comes the deals. I do it. I'm doing it right now. I'm doing the deals. I've got deals going out in fish and chips, and it gets the people through your doors, right? But it's a big risk because right now it's a risk because there's very little bottom line, right? So whereas if you've got a bottom line, you say, you know what? Yeah, I can do that. And the only winner is the consumer, right? Because prices would stop rising overnight. Well, at the end of the day, it's being so competitive. If you want to keep putting your price up, your ends up, it's either, unless you're at the high end of the market, which some people are, and people are going to pay £42 for a steak or whatever it is, right? If you're at that end of the market and you've got a market to sell to, great, good luck to you, right? But generally, with this, we're mixing it with the Frankie and Benny's and the TGI Fridays. We're a family going away to the cinema, right? Where to go for something to eat? Will we go to the TGI's or will we go to the Ashfield, right? They've got to decide now. Some of it will come down to price. Some of it now, I want fish and chips. Probably they won't eat fish and chips at Frankie and Benny's. Why would you, right? But it's got to be competitive. And like I say, our prices have gradually gone up, much against my will. I wish that we could have just froze the prices where they are. But you become, you can't make money. You're done. You're finished, right? Absolutely. If you can't make money, you're out of business.
Yeah.
So from my point of view, it's not fun being devil's advocate because anybody listening to this podcast will think I'm being a knobhead because everybody listening to this will want lower VAT. But I do think that whenever we talk about any policy, we need to be able to debate it from both sides because that shows weakness in a plan. And if we can show weakness in a plan, we can hopefully bolster it and then tell somebody about it to make it better.
Just think about a drop in VAT. Just think about it. I'm saying 17.5. That's because I think it's better than nothing, right? It's better than nothing. It's not that good and it probably would not please the majority, right? So let's just be slightly more buoyant in that and let's go for 15% VAT, right? 15% VAT overnight would... I would prosper. My company would prosper by somewhere around about 75 to 100,000 pounds, right, on a year. Now, so that goes on your bottom line. You pay your tax on your profit, right? You then say, right, I want to I want to decorate the restaurant, right? Let's decorate the restaurant. Let's get new furniture. Let's buy furniture. Let's get the decorators in. Let's paint and decorate. So all of a sudden, it's all about investment, right? It's all about jobs. Then you say, right, the place is looking good. More people come through your doors. They like a change. We need more staff. Let's get more staff. So we get more staff, and then you do the training. Let's get people trained. It's just there's nothing that can knock it.
Well, my concern is, and I get your point, and you deliver it very passionately, because I get it. You live and breathe this business. But if, for example, let's break that down. So let's say your company benefited by 50 grand a year. You have said you would fix up the restaurant and so on, which is great. But if you don't, then that's a 50 grand a year profit that's handed to somebody who, to the outside world, can afford it and is doing well anyway. So can you see how the optics don't look right to the consumer? Because especially with, these guys trying to get into power now, they're all going to be trying to get votes, and pleasing business is probably on a secondary concern. They want to please voters. So if, for example, you said everyone in hospitality gets it at 15%, well, that all of a sudden you've just gave McDonald's, for example, I don't know, £1 billion a year extra profit. That's going to shareholders. Do you see how it's very difficult?
Yeah. Right. So what? And my answer to that is absolutely straightforward. Right. A business like ours, who's been here for 38 years, right? We ain't in it for a fast buck, right? Right. Those who are lasting 3 years, they'll come and go for the rest of our days, right? But for a company like ours, 38 years, who have obviously reinvested the money they've got, we've kept a hold of staff. 38 years is a long time, right? So we haven't taken all the money and run like hell, because that's what the 3-year boys do, right? They take the money and run like hell, right? So, I just think what you're then left is you go to your local pub and its stock changes hands every 3 years, right? And you've now got a local pub, but that pub's now been there for 12 years, right? And that's because it's made money. It's managed to reinvent itself. It's managed to get the decorators in and get the toilets made. It's managed to do all these things because there's profit. There's profit at the end of the day, right? And so you've now got a good local boozer to go to, right? Whereas your local boozer right now, it's opening, it's closing, there's somebody new going in, right? It's now shut. It'll open again shortly. I see it in my eyes. I live in that sort of area, and there was one pub, and it's now been taken over by proper operators, right? But they had to go way upstairs last week. They've only been open for 3 months. They had to go upstairs last week to decide how much is going up on a pint of lager, right? Because prices are just rising and rising. And this is a busy bar. But even they're like, well, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how busy you are. If the bottom line's close to zero, we need to keep putting prices up. And sure as hell, 20 pence in a pint, the locals are like, 20 pence in a pint. A pint of lager is £5 for a pint of lager now. Now, that's in a local pub, that's quite... £5 is just a normal now. That same pint 2 years ago was £3.60.
Yeah, I think I get your point completely. I think if hospitality is going to have a hard time getting VAT down, I think the local pub is going to have near to impossible chance of getting VAT down, because I think now that it's clear that governments see alcohol as a problem.
But I suppose I've probably missed...
No, it doesn't matter.
No, but
I'll just reapply that.
That same pub will do a lot of food, right? So they will still benefit from a reduction in VAT, right?
I get your point. I get your point completely. For me, anybody listening to that, just replace that with restaurant. Because I do get what you're trying to say, that you're hoping that with lower VAT, more people come through the door. And
you also touched on McDonald's, right? Now, what do I think of McDonald's? How often do I use it? Not very often. I've got one in the town I stay. I will pop in occasionally, right? I don't criticise it. I think they're very, very good at what they do. Remember, mass employer. Would I grudge them the reduction in VAT? No, I wouldn't grudge them at all. What I would grudge is if their tax on profits was going overseas, was being paid elsewhere. I think that would be a ridiculous situation, and I don't know if they sorted it out or not. I know it's big things.
I think McDonald's have a very clean tax policy. I think that because obviously they have a lot of local UK franchisees and they have a local head office in London, so I do think they have a very, very clean policy. They don't, So I guess you wouldn't, if that's the case, then you wouldn't begrudge them getting.
No, not at all.
And in actual fact, lower VAT doesn't enter, any arrangement, because VAT goes straight to the exchequer. It's not like low tax or corporation tax where it's all offset against profits. VAT is a very clean transaction.
Yeah.
It's just interesting because I like having this thought process. I don't know if you're on the Just Eat mailing list, but I got an email from them yesterday, and it was saying that with the upcoming collections, they're going to campaign / lobby for a reduction in business rates, which is good news for you, a support in workforce development, and an office for small business. I think they mean a minister for small business.
Yeah.
What's notable, though, is that not even they are campaigning for lower VAT. I think it seems like these big organisations are realising that it's just not going to happen. And you mentioned earlier that I wrote it down because you mentioned that Rishi Sunak or whoever, Jeremy Hunt, is not listening. But I'd imagine that in, 2002 or 2004, Gordon Brown wouldn't have been listening either. Yeah. I think Gordon Brown only acted because the economy was on a slide. And I think the difference is as well. I remember they said that I read a paper from back then, like a report, and it said that car sales went up, but nothing else really went up because, again, car dealerships would drop that 2.5%, whereas restaurants, fish and chip shops, for the most part, wouldn't. And I do think that if that was dropped to 15%, I'm not an economist, it's just a guess. If the likes of McDonald's, Costa, Starbucks, KFC all dropped it and fish and chip shops didn't, would that then look bad?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and rightfully so. It's a competitive market, but we've got to compete.
So for you, to be clear then, if VAT was dropped, you would also go in line with that. You'd drop to then compete.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting because I think that puts you on a different path to many others. So, and that's just based on, figures that I've seen in the fish and chip groups. So, well, interesting. Obviously, as part of you've got a side role, let's say. So you're involved with the Ash Vale heavily, as you've discussed, but you're also, is it regional director for the National Federation of Fish Fryers?
Yeah, I represent Scotland, yeah.
Brilliant, fantastic. So you mentioned that, on the groups, there was a lot of mention from NFFF and newspaper resources and so on, that 1/3 of shops were likely to close. Do you think that ever happened?
It's hard to actually quote figures. I mean, like I say, for every shop closing, somebody else will go in and give it a try. I think you're seeing more shops closing than ever before, right? I think that's for sure.
How can we define that? Like, how do we see that? Because from my point of view, as let's say supplier to the industry, I can tell you, hand on heart, I've only seen one shop close. It's a friend of mine, actually, and he closed 2 years ago. And that was one shop out of, I think we've got 2,000 people on our website, our account. So I don't see that. But I wonder if other wholesalers see differently to me.
Yeah, I mean, it is obviously, it's with the social media, it's obviously, it's more advertised now, when places close. I mean, certainly in the city I'm in, there's been quite a lot of closures. Even a recent one, the chap, a well-known celebrity chef, actually. I mean, you were talking about a guy at the very end, top end of the market, and although his food would have been expensive, it was a place to go to, and he just says enough's enough. He's closing the door. So whether you can, I mean, bearing in mind that I look at it in two ways. I look at it I sit in various forums, and I look at it, I look at fish and chips being a sector, but I also look at it being within the hospitality sector. So I actually put fish and chips into hospitality because we run restaurants, right? Mm-hmm. And I think I think you are seeing more closures than ever before. I mean, we've got a few properties that we rent out or we're looking to get rid of, and it's not easy because rents are falling. So you're getting less rent, or we've got one property we're trying to get rid of. It was a lease we had, and people are not really that interested in it because the rent's too high. That was a rent we paid for like 20 years. So, the whole market has certainly been squeezed, right? So it's been squeezed for everyone. So it's quite. So is a more fish and chips. And if a fish and chip shop shuts down, it's quite easy for somebody to go in and give it a try. But it gets you back to that 3-year cycle.
I guess what I'd be interested in knowing is a solid statistic that tells me that a shop closed and stayed closed.
Sure.
I think, just from my point of view for this conversation, I think it would help. But again, I think I heard over COVID lots of fish and chip shops were going to close. We never saw it. Or at least when I say we never saw it, that doesn't mean that people lied. It just means that the data wasn't ever presented to us. It was all anecdotal, and no one's ever come to me and said, here's a report that clearly shows how many, that, for example, we know, we wrote an article on it the other day that last year there was last quarter there was a record new companies opening with Companies House. We know that happened. We also know that at some point last year, maybe, a record amount of closures would have happened with Companies House. And I'm speaking, again, anecdotally about that point. But what we don't...
I'll tell you what though, still is, right? I'll bet you if you did a survey, right? An honest survey, if they were honest enough to admit it, right? You'd have more owners of a fish and chip shop now, right? Telling you that if somebody came along and offered them money for their business tomorrow, they would walk away, right?
Oh, 100%, right. Absolutely. But I don't think that makes the same point. I think
they would run away, right? They would skip up the road, right? But the problem is, there's not people queuing up to buy your fish and chip shop. There'll be the exception. There's some fish and chip shops in great locations throughout Britain, ones that just stand out to you, right? That you could put on the market and they'd be gone tomorrow. There's a few of them, and I know them well, right? But your general fish and chip shop, and going back 20 years ago, you'd have a queue at the door of people looking to buy it from you, right?
So one thing I would agree with is that it's a buyer's market out there. Like, a buyer can come in and pretty much, pitch you whatever. And that is a sad place to be if you're a seller. But a few years ago, the opposite was true. So I do wonder, is this just a cyclical effect?
Well, you'd kind of hope so. You'd kind of hope that this cycle seems to be a long. It seems to be.
Yeah, no, it does. Well, I guess with everything that we've mentioned, so if we start with Brexit, and then before that we had austerity, so let's jump past Brexit, then we've had inflation, and then we've had COVID, and it's just, so yeah, it does feel like a long-winded cycle, and that's on a national level. But I don't know, I'm not saying that people aren't struggling. I'm not oblivious to the struggle. What I'm saying is, are we seeing closures? We might be seeing people that say, if someone comes tomorrow and gives me an offer, I'll be out of here. That will, that's always been there, I'd imagine. But it's just whether we're seeing the closures.
It will have been ramped up on a larger scale now. It's just been ramped up, right? And I know lots of people in the fish and chip industry that would just walk out to, sell tomorrow. If somebody came along and says, I'll offer you this, they would walk away tomorrow because they're like, I've just had enough, right? And that's because we're just having to grind right now. Listen, there's a lot of pleasure in selling fish and chips, right? I wouldn't have done it for 38 years if I had no pleasure. There's loads and loads of pleasure. I go to my work every day and I enjoy it, and I love seeing the customers, and I love selling fish and chips, and I love people saying this was great and that was great and we really enjoyed it. We'll see you next week. I love all that, right? But when you get to the end of the week and you've got not that much to show for it, right? It eventually does grind you down as an owner or a manager, or so if it's a manager, let's look at a manager scale. So your bonuses have gone because there's no profit, blah blah blah. It just eventually just have an effect on you, right? And you think, so it doesn't have a positive effect on you, put it that way, right? You've got to work and try and remain positive. And I think I speak for quite a lot of operators. I mean, there's going to be ones who can say, no, I'm absolutely fine. I take my hat off to you. You're in a good location. You've got a good turnover. You've got a great shop. And all is still going for you well, right? But when you're on a different scale, and you've got managers and you need an engineer and you've got office staff and all that, well, it's a bit tougher. It is a bit tougher.
I just wonder if government can ever support the niche aspect of anybody's business, and again, I don't know if VAT is the answer to that, because we started on with VAT. I just wonder if all the other things that support business and underpin business, I wonder if that's what's needed. But either way, I'm sure we'll find out after the next election. Yeah. I think for me, I just wonder if sometimes the messaging is a bit negative, and do we need a bit more positivity? And I understand that it's hard to look at positivity when there is a lot of negativity around us, but we are still selling the national dish. It's better than anything else out there. So I do think we should be telling customers, there's nothing better than this. Get your ass in this.
People crave for fish and chips, right? They've got that craving, right? Like some people crave to go for a pint of lager, right? The people crave for fish and chips. They always have done. They always will do, right? So the future's safe. The future's absolutely safe. I'm just saying it could be slightly more enjoyable with a little help, right? But the industry's in good shape. It's in good shape. The equipment's fantastic. The products, even the products the products you sell, for example, they weren't available all these years ago, right? The market's moved on so dramatically. Great equipment, great barter mixes, great curry sauces, whatever it is you're doing. It's probably is it easier to run a fish and chip shop now? Well, it probably is. Because everybody's aware of the quality. So even the Ashfield first started 38 years ago, it was way ahead of the competition. Because the old guy who owned it, old John Lowe, he based it on Guiseley, the Harry Ramsden and Guiseley, which was if I remember right, it was a single haddock with no bones and no skin and all that, and a proper barter mix was made to a secret recipe. And that had a wow factor. Now, that's where the Ashfield started, right? It had the wow factor. And it was so far ahead of the competition because the local guy around the corner still had bones in his fish and, an awful batter and fish that was racked up all night, And the whole image of fish and chips is changed. It's actually a clean living product now. It's not unhealthy. There's actually a degree of healthiness about it, So there's a hell of a lot of positives in fish and chips. But like I say, we just need to get through this because, as I say, the cycle seems to be quite a long cycle, and you're like, come on, just somebody give us a break somewhere,
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the things I was wondering actually, did you ever listen to the podcast I did with Jim Cowie at all?
You know what? I don't think I've heard it. I know Jim Cowie exceptionally well. Right?
Yeah. So he's very, very pro.
This podcast is going well, but how long was you on for, Jim? I mean, I would imagine about 7 hours, right?
Oh no, it was only on for about an hour and a bit.
He's an adorable person, Jim. But
he absolutely adores passionately. He believes in Scottish seafood through and through. I almost guess that if I was to give him a piece of Norwegian haddock, he'd slap it around my face. But he was mentioning in his podcast that he believes that every single fish and chip shop in the UK should be using, Scottish haddock. And I sort of proposed the idea to him that, do you not see that causing problems for the Scottish fleets, the Scottish processors, the Scottish fish and chip shops that rely on it, because then the prices would rocket? What's your thought processes behind that?
Well, it's a reasonable state. I mean, it would be a fantastic idea that if every fish and chip shop in the UK used haddock from the North Sea, right? That's great. But there's not enough boats. There's probably not enough fish. So you'd have a major problem. So, it's not doable. So, I mean, I use fresh haddock. I always have done, but I will not sit here and criticise Norwegian haddock or Icelandic haddock.
No, you don't have to. No, of course
I will not criticise it because I think it's an excellent product. Our scenarios is we are next to Peterhead Fish Market. It used to be Aberdeen, and Aberdeen closed, and now we're relying on Peterhead. And everybody expects you to be selling fresh haddock. Right, round about this area. And if we stopped selling fresh haddock tomorrow in favour of a Norwegian frozen at sea haddock, it would have a damaging effect on our business, right? Look, I've had weekends when there's no fish, because if you're on a fresh fish market and the high winds get up and the boats don't get in or they don't get out, there's no fish, right? So you need a backup. And I have used frozen at sea, Icelandic, Norwegian, whatever it may be, and some customers have said to me, that fish tonight was wonderful, right? So, and I know it tastes great. But the other customers say to you, that fish is different tonight. Nothing wrong with it, but it's got a different texture, right? It's got a different texture. It might have a different shape, because the shape's slightly different. It's a bit more square, right? But if that's what you've been brought up on, and it works, I don't have any issues with that. Because I'll tell you what, right now, the price is in your favour dramatically. Because I'm paying double, and I mean double, for fresh haddock as I could be buying Norwegian frozen at sea. But I'm stuck in Aberdeen. It's one of these places. And like I say, I sell a fish supper with a lot of confidence that people would say, wow, that texture is amazing. But, I mean, most of England is frozen at sea haddock. And look how much fish to sell. So they don't suffer as a result of it. So I certainly don't criticise. It's a nice idea by Jim, and I get his enthusiasm. But the facility, the resources are not there.
No. Yeah, no, I thought that as well, and he took issue with the fact that that the NFFF, his issue, you could listen to it, and I'm trying to paraphrase it, but he took issue with the fact that he feels that they don't support Scottish fish enough. And I sort of said to him, you know what, Jim, actually, I don't think that's true. I think, and he'll agree with this. Well, you could agree and disagree because I said it on the podcast. And I says, I actually think if the Scottish Seafood Federation went to the NFFF and said, hey, we'd like to sponsor something at the awards, they would accept you just like they accept anybody else.
100%. I said, 100%. And I'm actually disappointed. No, I haven't raised the mark.
It was only an opinion.
I had a degree of disappointment that they haven't sponsored it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Has anyone gone to them and said something?
They did do sponsoring in the past. When it was through Seafish, they certainly did sponsor it, right? It is maybe something we need to look at. Of course, they'll have an annoyance that, it's sponsored by Norway, etc., etc. But that's life, I mean, at the end of the day, they're not in a position to supply the British market, the entire British market, right? They do an incredibly great job with what they do. But they're not sitting left with leftover fish that they can't sell.
No, exactly. No, they're not crying, are they?
No.
So no, I think I was just sort of saying from the point of, look, Jim, in my opinion, get whoever runs this organisation. If there isn't one, make one, but get them to call NFFF and get involved. And
I'd be delighted to have talks for sure.
Right, there you go. So, by any chance, did you listen to the podcast I did with Andrew?
No, I haven't got around to it yet either. Sorry. So
no, that's don't.
Was that a good one? Did you?
Well, yeah, Andrew did amazing as always. He answered a lot of hard questions, and because again, I tried to think about things from a different angle, and we've got to. And anybody listening to this sometimes thinks that it's my opinion, but actually, I'm just proposing different opinions for the sake of the conversation, because you have to. You can't. I truly believe that if people want the lower VAT, if they want lower business rates, they need to understand everything from the flip side, because that's how the government or the receiving end is accepting that information. So, I personally think that he did great, and it was just interesting because there was a lot of things that he sort of unpacked. It was a nearly 2-hour podcast, so there was a lot that he unpacked. So I think you'd have to listen to it on your way to Elgin and back from it.
I'd love to do that. So I mean, Andrew is a fantastic ambassador for the industry. I mean, he is a natural leader. He's realistic. He's not biased. He looks at it from every angle. And, I think we're finally placed. I would dread to think how we'd survive without Andrew,
No, definitely. And obviously there is some hardships happening, and again, obviously, you're talking about how some shops are struggling. That will have a knock-on effect for the NFFF and membership. So obviously there's challenges there that people like me and people listening to this wouldn't be aware of.
Yeah.
So, thank you for your time. It's been absolutely great. I don't think we've missed anything, have we?
No, I think we've done pretty good. It's been a great chat.
It's weird how yesterday I had 0 notes and this morning I had 2 pages.
Yeah. I suppose my only other point is the enthusiasm I have for obviously being involved with the Fish and Chip Awards, which has now moved over to the NFFF, which I think is great going forward. There's maybe a few little things to be tweaked here and there. I think they've done an exceptionally good job this last 2 years. Obviously, your award yourself, well done for that. Much deserved. I also got a lot of enthusiasm out of the Young Fry of the Year. I mean, that to me is the best. Oh no, take away from the two national winners last year. I think we got the right winners. I think when you look at that, the 4 kids that came through, Jamie, James, Glenn, and Kieran. I mean, that in itself gives you hope. That in itself gives you hope. and you look forward to the next 4 next year, and just keep building that. And I'm in touch with the lads, and they actually, 2 of them come up to see me, and you just think, you know, that builds well for the future. You got that lad Gary from the Lighthouse, Lighthouse Fisheries. I mean, best newcomer 1 year, top 10 next year. You know, you had the Fishworks and Largs, top 3 2 years in the trot. I mean, that's fantastic. So, you know, that does, I think it does tell us that the industry is moving. It's moving forward. We're still okay. We've got to be upbeat and see where it gets us.
Yeah, completely agree.
Fingers crossed. And you sell plenty of batter mixes, you know.
Well, you know, we've got to keep trying. We've got to keep the positivity flowing. And I think that's the key thing. And, but, you know, you're doing your bit, you're pushing along, and people will thank you for your service, because you are really putting in a lot of effort outside of what you do.
Sure. Okay.
So, yeah. Thank you for your time.
Talk soon.